like light and just blasting out of you, just so intense. And it's like, oh, that must be the enlightened, that must be the perspective of God, because it's so amazing, it's so intense, it's ecstatic, it's just too much for my individual mind to be able to handle. um, but then the drugs wear off. If you've been following the non-dual teachings, Vedantic Advaita teachings about the achievement of the enlightened state, the coming to oneness with the Godhead, or any of that stuff, and the modern teachers that I really appreciate, Adi Shanti, Eckhart Tolle, Rupert Spiro, the the discussion of how to get there, the direct path, is so simple. Now, of course, it's not easy, but it's like, it's so simple. Am I my body? No, I know my body changes. Am I my mind? My thoughts? No, these change. The perceptions, they change. So I'm the knowing. I'm the infinite knowing, the only knowing that there is, only knowing itself. And you hear it over and over again, and and it's like, well, okay, great. I totally get that. If there is an infinite knowing, then there can't be any other knowing, because then the infinite knowing wouldn't be infinite. It would be displaced by some amount. So if it's infinite, it's everywhere. It's all, not all time, because it's not in time, it's eternal. And so you know all these things, and yet, why am I not enlightened? Why am I not in the infinite perspective of all things connected to everything? And the reason why is because I don't allow it. We don't allow it. And um, and it's just so funny, because my particular path involved a lot of plant medicine, and it creates so much fantasy in the mind about what the enlightened perspective actually is. And what I mean by that is, you have some mushrooms, acid, ayahuasca, San Pedro, peyote, DMT, in smokable form, and all these things, and they generate these experiences, just like, like light and just blasting out of you, just so intense. And it's like, oh, that must be the enlightened, that must be the perspective of God, because it's so amazing, it's so intense, it's ecstatic, it's just too much for my individual mind to be able to handle. But then the drugs wear off, and then I'm back here. So how do we reconcile that? And my recent insight about that is, it's all God's perspective. Because there's only God, there's only God's knowing of himself, or get rid of pronouns, only God's knowing of itself. Every perspective it has is that perspective, and it's the sense that we are not enlightened only comes from the denial of the reality that we are as it's presented to us. So so I thought about that. I'm like, oh, well, what is enlightenment? Like, what is it that's so valuable about it? Because you would never want to be in that place of like all the time. Like, it'd be overwhelming. You'd be non-functional. You'd just be, you know, drooling on yourself, and then your brain would probably fry shortly after. And so the enlightened perspective, I think, most eloquently put, is just peace and happiness. And so from that place of, okay, well, it doesn't have to be such an enormous experience, because enlightenment is not an experience. It's just that if I can go into myself and just see what's there without creating anything, How do I feel? Oh, I actually feel really calm and centered and happy. And and being enlightened doesn't need to be anything more than that. I hope this helps.